morning, guys. Welcome to the Use Lightning Flow to Register New Community Members session. Um, I'm Ashley,
And I'm Jitendra.
and so we're software engineers for the Community Cloud. Specifically, we're part of the Community Service Integration team. So if you ever, work with the contact support or flows in communities, that's us. So if you have any questions, just please ask after. Just quick, the forward-looking statement. Just make sure you make your purchasing decisions based on products available today and not any promises that we say on this session. So basically what we have in plan for you guys today is just going to have it divided up in two parts. It's very demo-based, so I'm going to be showing you first what you can do with the Lightning Flow component in communities to register your products or register guest users. And then after that, I'm going to go into a bit of details of how to set up guest users and then how to enable self-registration. There are quite a few steps that you need to do first. And then I'm going to hand it off to Jitendra, and he'll go more into the back end of how to use Apex code to integrate with your Lightning Flow component to then make basically the registration happen. And then we'll have a few minutes for some Q&A after. So so I'm just going to go ahead and straight go into the demo. So here I am in our community, and I am a coffee shop owner. I just bought some espresso machines, and I'm here on the Capricorn Coffee community because I want to register my products. And so I'm going to be going around here. And then when I scroll down, I see that right away I can register my equipment. And now this is using the flow component. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on these three because those are the three that I have. And so I'm going to click Next. Now, on the next screen, it's going to ask me for my details so that I can keep track of my products. So now, when I'll do that, you can see that at the bottom, there's a checkbox. And that's basically giving the option to your customers to either just register the products and then move on, or if they keep it checked, they can create a portal account for themselves. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. Put my email here. And now we're also, for this flow, we're using the email field as the username too. You can change that on the Apex code. Jitendra will show you that later. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Now this next screen, we are integrating GDPR on our registration flow. GDPR is pretty new. It came into effect last year, so it's actually a great idea for you to integrate into your registration. You capture some marketing consent, and also just more transparent to your customers if you want to track them or not, or you want to be able to contact them. So I'm just gonna click on track location. So click Next, and then for the last part, we're gonna ask the customers to put in some password. This is just for demo purposes only. You don't want to necessarily be able to give your customers the ability to set up the password right away. Another way to do it is you can skip this and have them send an email. When they register themselves, they'll get a welcome email to the community. They'll have a link to send them to the community, and then they can verify themselves and set up the password then. But again, this is just for demo purposes only. So I'm going to hit Next, and it's going to register myself. And now, again, same thing with the login button. We quickly just added that so that we can show you this quickly. And just another way to show you that, this is just an easy way to register. I'm going to click Login. And then, so basically, I used the flow component with some Apex code, and now I am in the community. I am a customer user. I now have access to a lot more stuff around here. You can see my equipment. You can see your orders. You can see other equipment that exists for Capricorn. I can explore. And, this is just awesome. So now I'm going to just go ahead and go to my profile. And, I can see that everything is in there, my details. And then over here, I can see that my products are now under my account. And now I can keep track of, what's new, if I have any troubles, I can come back and determine what is the issue. So that was, how that took me just a few minutes to just register, super easy. So now, it was very flawless. So now the only one thing is the GDPR settings, that's on the contact record. So you can see here that they're showing me that, okay, they're not going to mark it to myself because that's what I said on the GDPR screen. So yeah, that was how easy it was to register. And so now I'm just going to go ahead and go back here. And then I'm going to go over some of the details that you need to know before you can do all of what I just showed you. First of all, starting in the winter 19, the run flows permission will now be under the guest user profile. So that will actually let your guest users use the flow component. So after that's that one part. But now to even enable guest users in your community and then to be able to let them self-register, you need to follow certain steps. So number 2, 3, and 4. Specifically, your Salesforce admin needs to go and enable self-registration in the administration workspace tile. And out of that, you'll have to choose 2 things, the count and the profile that the community user will now belong to. One thing to notice, though, is that the account owner needs to have a role assigned. And the reason behind that is because when you create a community user, we have to have, they get a role assigned based on the account hierarchy, or else it will fail. Next thing too is just make sure that the license that the profile belongs to has enough community licenses. Just make sure your Salesforce admin has provision for enough. That would you just keep that in mind. And then for the last part is GDPR. It's again, like I said, it's pretty new. You can find that under the data protection and privacy and setup, and then you can enable it there. And then it'll have a reminder there to to add the individual object to the contact page layout, and we only care about the contact object because when you create a community user, you're creating 2 kinds of records: a contact record, then it's related to the user record. And then for those checkboxes that I showed you, you can create custom fields of type formula and then again add them to the contact page layout. So I'm just going to go ahead and add them and show you as a Salesforce admin where you can find all of those. And when I first started here at Salesforce, it was always hard for me to remember where was everything. So I feel like I should just show you for you first. So here in the community builder, to enable guest users, this is the checkbox here. If that is off by default, and basically what will happen is any guest user that tries to go to your community will just always be sent to the login page. So after you check that, then you have access to the guest user profile. This is the easiest, most straightforward way to get to that profile. You will not find it in the setup profiles tab. So always go to the community builder if you're ever wondering where it is. So that's just to enable guest users. So now for letting them self-register, there's several ways you can do this. So the way we showed you right now is through the flow component that we added on the home page. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but after I logged in, when I scroll down, you didn't see it anymore. And that's because we're using component audiences to only make it visible to the guest user. So that's one way to use it. The other way to use it will be to use the register page down here. Now, when you click login, it will give you an option to either register or not. So here you can then replace the out-of-the-box self-register component with the flow component instead. If I also suggest that once you set up all the self-register, to use the out-of-the-box self-register to test to make sure that self-registration is working before you move on to using the flow component. So now just to go over to how to enable self-register, if you go to the Workspaces Administration tile, you'll find here the Login and Registration tab. And if you scroll down, you'll see this. So right now, it will be disabled by default. So once you enable it, there's 2 things that I mentioned, is these 2 right here. The profile, you can only choose between a customer user or customer user plus. And then for account, it can be either partner or customer. If you do have person account set up, you can just leave it blank. That's another option. And then, next thing is the data protection right here. Like I said, there's a reminder here where, added the individual object to the contact, and then that is how you will be able to set up GDPR for your customer users. Right, so That is all
right.
for my part. I'm gonna hand it off to Jitendra, and he'll show you the Apex code for the Lightning flow.
Thank you. So let's just okay. All right. So this is actually developed using three parts. The first one being the flow itself. So here we have like the flow builder open, and what we have done here is just like added screen for every single item we ask for. So for example, the first screen here, essentially we dynamically load all the products from the org and the list there so that people can go and register. And once this is done, on the next step, what we do is we get like all the user information and all. The checkbox that Ashley showed at the time, if the check, so we have a decision node here, and based on whatever they decide whether they selected a checkbox or not, we take a decision here, and if we want to show the next step on the flow or not. So based on that, so when Ashley selected the checkbox, we went to the rest of the flow and asked for GDPR preferences, password, and all those things. So the last step here, this is where what we did is we added a Lightning component here. You do not really need a Lightning component to actually do the self-registration. You can directly call the Apex class from the flow. However, we wanted to show you how to like integrate the Lightning component, and we just added it here. Let me jump into the Lightning component in the developer console. So first thing, I want to show you the design file. Essentially, we are taking all the parameters from the UI and passing it to. And if you look at the design file, it relates one-to-one with what are the options available as an input here on the flow. To make your component available in flow, you need to do one thing, that is like you just need to like make it implement available for screen flows. This way your component is available in this particular drop-down on the Lightning side, and you can configure that way. So yeah, this is a very lightweight component. We are just taking the input, and if you look at the controller, we are just passing along all the values that we got to an action create external user in our Apex controller. And the Apex controller is actually specified over here. So let's go and take a look at the Apex controller itself. So this is very straightforward. What we did essentially is created, this is the method that is being called from the client side. This is the controller. We take all the values that we got from the UI. Again, this is not the only way to get it. You can actually directly have these values passed from your flow instead of going through the Lightning component. But you can use Lightning component if you want to actually put any kind of custom UI on that. So once we get this data, we create a user object, and we add all the items on the user. Here I can also update the preferences. For example, here I'm updating one user preference to actually set community as default on the mobile. Otherwise, S1 browser is default over there. Then like community nickname should be unique. I'm just generating a unique nickname over here. Once I set all the things, I'm calling a method on the site object here to actually create the portal user. Now this is the core. This is essentially the core of it. This is the important part here. Like, so this site object. This is not new. This is exposed for a while, and what you can do essentially over here is there are multiple methods that you can use as a guest user to create your external user. And there are different variations available. For example, there is a variation available that does not accept password, and that way it automatically sends out email to your customer to actually click and register for the community. So that is what we are doing here. And after this point, your user is created on your org. Now, after this, you can set up anything custom you want to do. Like, for example, here we are doing GDPR settings. We are setting on the, so individual is the record on which GDPR setting is set. Then we are just associating with the contact. Another thing we are doing is we are creating asset. Asset is the one that we are using to link a product to a user. And then when you select the product to be registered, we essentially just went through, like, we just looked through it, we create an asset entity and just insert it. At the end, again, we messed up. We put this in the same flow, but you can essentially have another component or another call for your login. And we are again doing like a login here and returning the URL. Now, after calling this method, the user is logged in and the session is created, but on the UI side, it is not. And this URL contains all the information about the session. So once this is returned back to the user, what we are doing is we are just showing a login button, and again, this is for demo purposes only. And what we are doing in our controller is on clicking, this is the click handle for the button, we are just changing the href. Now, one thing to note here is, since we are changing the location of the browser itself, and so every time you log in, there is a hard reset because you're changing the user context from guest to a login user. So any state that is on the UI is lost at that particular point. Even if you are in the flow, at some point in the flow, your state address is lost. So what we suggest is use this as the last step, because whatever comes after this in the flow, that will not be that will not be accessible essentially by the customer if you change the Windows location here. So to go over this, like so what we went over is essentially these are the things that keep in mind. So the first thing is the site object itself. Go look at that object. There are a lot of methods that you can use on this object as a guest user. You can actually call them in your Apex class, either via Lightning component or directly via flow and all. You can actually get like that functionality. If you are using Lightning component, it will only work in the Lightning template. Just to keep that in mind, because it is not directly supported in the Visual Force flows. Again, one thing to stress here is this is just a demo code. This is nowhere like close to production code and all. This is a point where you can actually just take a look at, you see like how few things can be done, and like it's a starting point for your custom solution. There are a lot of things that you would want to do on top of this to make like proper solutions. And yeah, again, and here are links to like the documentation on the site object that I just showed you, then the report that has this particular code. And these are links to more documentation on like basically flows on the guest user. How can you like actually go and achieve like more detail on like how can you actually build something around this, something on this in line. All right.
Yeah.
That's it from my
So
side.
yeah, I'll leave this slide up for a few minutes so that you can take a picture of the links. But like Jitendra said, those links bolded are very useful information in there. The first link has all the information about the site object, so that you want to use that, and it's a lot more info. The GitHub link to the code that he just showed you will all be available there. So yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, any
All right.
questions?
Enable partner communities, because in the setup I saw you says customer plus.
No, so not for partner. No, so it's registering users is not. I believe you cannot do it for partner licenses. It's only for plus or regular.